Welcome back, RotoBallers. I'm the Roto Chef, Pierre Camus, here to give you my top 12 wide receiver rankings for fantasy football drafts heading into the 2021 season. It is draft season, so it's time to look at everything that matters, starting with our rankings. Of course, we have our constantly updated preseason draft rankings here on RotoBaller for every format. I'm going to talk today about PPR just because that's the most popular. So here it is. Let's dive into it. Starting with number one. No surprise, the number one receiver is Davante Adams. Now, a lot of people say, well, there's no way he's going to score that many touchdowns again. 18 touchdowns. No, he probably won't, and he doesn't need to because he was also one of the top receivers in terms of targets and yards, second in total targets and fourth in yardage. And he actually led the NFL, all wide receivers, in team share of targets. Yes, no surprise to hear that Aaron Rodgers looks for Davante Adams first, second, and third before anybody else. And also no surprise, the Packers didn't do anything to help Aaron Rodgers out this offseason, which is why he almost wasn't a Packer, but he still is. So the Rodgers-Adams connection is still good for at least one more year. There's really no reason to fade Adams at all because he is still going to be the man. And I feel like number one is a good place for him at wide receiver. Now, number two, there's a matter of debate here. So let's start off by saying Calvin Ridley actually has a path to be the number one receiver. Davante Adams still the better pick, but Ridley, let's not forget, last year was third among all receivers in receiving yards per game. And as far as fantasy points goes, he was a top 5 receiver. This is somebody who legitimately could improve. He was actually number 2 in terms of team share of air yards, 38.9%. That was with Julio Jones playing half the season. Yes, Julio Jones was there technically. You may forget about it, but he was there for about 9 games on and off the field. But still, even with Julio there, Calvin Ridley was by far the favorite target of Matt Ryan without Julio. And again, no additions there in the wide receiver core. Just a rookie tight end, which I'm frankly not too worried about eating into Ridley's production. We're just going to see more Ridley. He's going to be the alpha. He's going to be the next Julio Jones, frankly. So wide receiver 2, I don't think that's an outrageous prediction for him because he wasn't that far off from it last year. All right, now number 3 is Tyreek Hill. I could bump him down a couple of spots, honestly, and be okay with it, but he's tied to arguably the best quarterback in the league, at least one of the most productive quarterbacks for the fantasy crowd here, and that's Pat Mahomes. Tyreek Hill is always going to be a big play machine. Now, thing is, he scored a lot of his points on touchdowns too, 15 touchdowns last year, but it's hard to project a regression for that offense. So the thing is, he was a little farther down in terms of receiving yards per game, I believe 8th. And so he doesn't necessarily have that week-to-week stability of some of the other guys we're going to talk about. But you'll take that trade-off because, again, those boom games for him, they're really boom games, and they could actually be week-winning games for you alone. So Tyreek Hill, there's really no question about him at this point. Stefon Diggs, first year with Josh Allen, proved to be pretty good, led the league in targets, receptions, and yardage. Now, he, on the other hand, might get some positive touchdown regression. Hard to say because, again, Josh Allen is always going to take the ball on himself near the goal line, and Diggs isn't as much of a deep threat as some of these other receivers. So he's probably going to stay about the same. But you know what? If he does, this is pretty good for him. Top 5 receiver. Diggs stayed healthy. That's the main thing, too. He had some issues in Minnesota on and off, but that chemistry is definitely working. All right, now number 5, a guy who I legitimately love and want to put at the number 1 spot. But trying to be realistic here, DK Metcalf, though, just growing and getting better as an NFL receiver. And again, I love the fact that there is no competition. It's him and Tyler Lockett and nobody else. If anything, the Seahawks managed to get even less deep at the receiver position. They lost David Moore, which I know isn't saying much, but that was their number 3 receiver. They drafted Dwayne Eskridge, who's been hurt and has been very limited throughout the preseason. Didn't add anybody else of consequence. So I really feel like we could see more DK Metcalf. Both him and Lockett were top 10 in terms of team share of targets. Just think about that. 2 receivers in the same team. They just are dominating all of Russell Wilson's pass attempts, and that is fine. So Metcalf is a beast in the red zone with that big frame. He's somebody who can take it to the house on any play. He kind of gives you everything. So I really feel like DK Metcalf has the highest ceiling out of any receiver, but we're going to put him number 5 just for now. All right, now number 6, Justin Jefferson. Great rookie season. Will he get better? Will we see some negative regression? There's really no reason to think so. Same situation here in Minnesota. That offense hasn't changed. So with Jefferson, the question is red zone targets. Thielen got a lot more, twice as many touchdowns as Jefferson. Could things swing the other way? It's probably not going to change too much. Thielen probably won't score quite as many touchdowns, but for Jefferson, also, can we be sure he's going to get 1,400 yards? I think it evens out in the end. Number 6 is about where he finished last year in PPR leagues, and I think it's about where he finishes this year again. Now, number 7, DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins was one of the leading target getters in the NFL, and that, is the fact that no matter who else is there at receiver for Arizona, he's always going to be the alpha and the target hog. So DeAndre Hopkins, I feel like he is a very safe pick at receiver. There's really no question here. Nothing has changed that dramatically in that offense either. The thing is, does he have the same upside as he did in Houston? And does he have the same upside as some of these other receivers we've talked about? Surprisingly, no, just because of the fact that, well, in Houston, he was the only thing to target. And in Arizona, that offense is a little more diverse. That's an offense that actually runs the ball more than you would expect from the fact that they're called the air raid offense. So while Hopkins does see a ton of targets, his catch rate isn't as high as some of those other receivers we talked about. And Arizona does run the ball a little bit more in the red zone, surprisingly, than some of those other teams. So Hopkins, again, really solid right here, number 7. But I think his days as the top dog in fantasy for receivers is over. All right, moving on. Wide receiver 8. Love Allen Robinson. There's no way you can't. He doesn't care who's at quarterback. He's going to be productive. Should be an upgrade this year at the very least. Andy Dalton is already an upgrade over Nick Foles, Mitch Trubisky combination. And then when Justin Fields actually takes over, we might even see the best season yet from Allen Robinson. So love him here. He's a very solid kind of fallback if you're waiting on your top receiver because you go running back early, or just because of your draft position, you have to wait till later. Don't be mad with Allen Robinson as your wide receiver 1. Keenan Allen at 9. Now, again, talking PPR here, as far as PPR rankings, this is something that's going to change, as far as PPR versus standard. If you happen to play in a non-PPR league, no points per reception, what we call standard, Keenan Allen will drop in the rankings. He should drop. He's more close to like the wide receiver 15 range. I believe he finished as wide receiver 14 in standard last year scoring, but it was all the way up to 7 in PPR. So splitting the difference here, I know I'm talking PPR. I have him just slightly lower, but again, we're splitting hairs here between him and Allen Robinson. So Keenan Allen, very solid pick. He's still going to be one of the favorite targets for Justin Herbert, and that offense is just getting better. Now, what about Scary Terry, wide receiver 10? Feels like a good spot. I know everyone's all over Fitzpatrick being in that offense. Look, I get it. He's got that gunslinger reputation. Maybe I'll just help his receivers. But this is not a team that, it's not an offense that's really going to be an overly dynamic one, to be honest. This is a team that's still going to be built on its defense, which is its strength. Fitzpatrick isn't quite what he used to be. He had those big monster numbers when he was with Tampa, and he was slinging away. This is not the same offense. He's going to fit into Ron Rivera's system. Antonio Gibson is there. This will be a little bit more diverse. So long story short, Terry McLaurin won't see this huge boom in production, but top 10 is just about right for him. He's a guy who has that big playability and big game ability. But again, let's not go too crazy just because of Fitzmagic. All right, and wide receiver 11, I have CeeDee Lamb. One of my must-have players. If you saw my video on must-have players, I explain all the reasons why I'm all over him this year. So go ahead and check that out. Again, the guy who definitely has upside to be higher than this, but he's not necessarily going this early. In a lot of drafts, you'll see him fall closer to wide receiver 15. You can get him third, maybe even fourth round, depending on where you play. So definitely somebody to keep an eye on as a very high upside wide receiver 2. Even though I have him ranked as a wide receiver 1 in a 12-team league. And then last but not least is A.J. Brown. Early this offseason, even before the draft, we saw a lot of people talking about A.J. Brown as the number 1 receiver in all of fantasy. Yes, it's true. It was all over Twitter. I saw it multiple times from multiple people projecting this huge monster season, and then they went and got Julio Jones, and then that died down. So look, Julio Jones is going to be an upgrade over Corey Davis. Is it going to be a massive difference, though? Not really. Corey Davis was surprisingly good last year. A lot of people don't realize he was very efficient. Julio Jones, of course, not the same as he was back in the day. I don't think this offensive philosophy will change too much. Thing is, this is still a run first team. It's always going to be a run first team as long as Derrick Henry is there. So we can't project too much higher for AJ Brown. Now, I know on a point per game basis, he was actually number 4 in fantasy points per game for a wide receiver. We do have to step that down just a little bit because of the Julio factor. Why do I have him down to wide receiver 12? Well, again, I think the upside isn't as high. We could see improvement in terms of CeeDee Lamb, Terry McLaurin. These guys are still, even though they're about the same age as AJ Brown, in their offensive roles, they are the clear top dog. AJ Brown, not the clear top alpha receiver there anymore. So I feel like even though on certain occasions he's going to be one of the top receivers on a weekly basis for fantasy, he's still on the lower end of the wide receiver one spectrum for me in terms of season long, just because of that volatility going a little bit up and down. So I like AJ Brown, but just barely sneaks into my top 12. No Tampa receivers here. Well, you know what? Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, you can make a strong case for either one of them. Let me know if you think that they should be included. I am all over Chris Godwin, have him as a top 15 receiver, but I can't just put him in my top 12 yet. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Check out my running back video, also top 12, let you know who I think you should be targeting in your draft.